Welcome to the Detroit Regional Chamber's Inside the CEO Mind series, our regular event featuring significant leaders in the Chamber's orbit and providing our members an insight into their leadership story, their lessons learned, and about the companies that they lead. Thank you for taking your valuable time from your schedule to join us today, and I know you will find today time very well spent. Today, the Chamber is very pleased to feature Tom Shafer, CEO of TCF National Bank. Now, as impressive as that title is, I am equally pleased that Tom has held the title of board member, Detroit Regional Chamber, for many, many years. And regardless of the bank entity he has led over the years or the titles that he has had, Tom has maintained his steadfast commitment to the Chamber, both with his personal time and his corporate resources, and we are exceptionally thankful to Tom and his colleagues for their investment in the Chamber and our commitment to the region. Now, usually when we bring on a speaker, it is customary to provide a background on that speaker, but this is Inside the CEO Mind. This forum is designed to allow our speaker to introduce themselves to our membership and for our audience to gain insights from the top leaders in our state. So without further ado, I am very pleased to welcome a board member from the Detroit Regional Chamber, the CEO of TCF National Bank, my friend, Tom Shafer. Tom?
Thanks, Danny. I appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with Chamber members and people as interested in Detroit and Southeast Michigan as I am, and I look forward to our conversation today. I'll move right into the document. Thank you. So I'm going to quickly move through a number of these slides, but a little bit my career background. We'll talk about the evolution of banking and at least in the last 40 years, how it's impacted my career and the activities of the industry that I've been in. I'll spend most of the time on the TCF journey. We've had just a remarkable opportunity to grow TCF and its predecessor organizations, and spend some time talking about that. We'll also talk about our commitment to Detroit, and I think that's an important part of our story. And then some takeaways for me that have helped me, work through my career and lead in the positions that I've had the opportunity to be in. Thanks. Let's go to the next slide. So just a little bit of background. I've been in the banking industry now for 40 years. I started in 1981. I had fortunate experiences to work for people that I've had tremendous respect for. Opportunities to grow and develop at each stage of my career. I've served on executive leadership teams of two of the companies. First, I was with Michigan National for 13 years, then Citizens out of Flint for 16 years. That's really when my executive career began. And then for the last 11 years with TCF and its predecessor organizations. One of the highlights is obviously the number of M&A transactions we've been involved in. During the last 10 years, we've had 14 M&A transactions. We'll go through that a little bit. 27 in my career, though. And that's really, while M&A might be a hallmark and defining part of my career, I really have spent almost every day remembering why we're here. I've been in a service business since the beginning of my career. We have no products on our shelves that are unique to us, that we can patent and that sell because it has remarkable value. It's really about a people business and the culture of your organization. And I try to stay very focused on that. Have our companies been a good place to work, to develop careers, to attract talent? Are we a good place to bank? And are we making it easy for our customers? So as again, in a service business, it's really about our people, developing our people, their attitudes, and executing on behalf of customers. Let's go to the next slide. It really has been a remarkable transformation as I've watched the banking industry develop, at least since I joined it. We went from 14,000 banks in 1981. The industry peaked at about 1985 at about 14,500 banks. And then consolidation in earnest began. And it really started actually back into the 70s when regulations began to change. Interest rates on deposits were deregulated in the 70s, and that was a precursor to change. The inflation of the late 70s and early 80s, when I joined the industry, interest rates were headed to 21%. And we had double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment. The manufacturing economy was really in a very difficult spot. And then you add to that, along interstate banking, competition continued to increase. We've had a number of recessions over the last 40 years, and every time you get into a recession, it puts stress on a bank. Banks are really a reflection of the communities that we serve. From community banks to the very local economy to state or regional economies. And as you go through these type of changes, it really puts stress on a banking organization if it's not well prepared for the next chapter. But to add to that, the level of regulatory complexity that has increased over the last 40 years, and then technology. Technology has been a fundamental change in our industry, and not only from a customer acceptance or operations of the organization. It's really the rate of change in technology and the rate of utilization by our customers has changed dramatically. So one of the issues that we're now facing as an industry is finding the capacity to invest in products and markets, but primarily in technology right now, because we're competing with the largest companies in the industry that are 10, 20, 30 times our size, but also competing with unregulated fintechs who are very agile, can attract a dramatic amount of funding very quickly and be very focused. Payment systems are an interesting study right now about the change in the industry and the amount of dollars going into different aspects. And so I think that's one of the reasons that you're going to continue to see some consolidation. It's just simply the ability to find dollars to invest in both client-facing technologies as well as operating technologies to drive the organizations forward. Let's go to the next slide. This is really the story that I wanted to spend some time on today, and it's just been a remarkable journey. In 2008 to 2010, you're all aware of the depth of the recession and really the dramatic recession that our country went through, and the amount of banks that were failing, especially as we headed into 09 and 10, was dramatic. In Michigan, we had the vast majority of our banks on the watch list, and the FDIC was put in a place of looking for the next chapter for many banks that weren't going to succeed, that didn't have the capital strength to survive. And many banks actually end up failing at the beginning of a recovery. And just like companies, when they've got to invest to grow and their balance sheets have to expand, that's the moment that many times organizations become insolvent. And the FDIC wanted to try to get ahead of that. So in 09, Gary Torgo and Dave Provost recapitalized a small bank, First Michigan. And what they had intended on doing was recreating what was Bank of Bloomfield. Dave had run that bank for 17 years, a successful community bank. He sold that in 2005 and had wanted to get back into banking and kind of recreate that really well-run community bank. So what they ended up with was a $30 million bank that was perfectly clean, no bad assets. And so they had a commercialized franchise that was ready to start. Really hadn't been commercialized yet. It was really in the very beginning of the organization, but it was clean. And so the FDIC went to them and said, are you interested in acquiring failed banks? And there was two things that they had to do. They had to get capital to acquire additional banks, and they had to get a management team. And so most of you probably know both Dave Provost and Gary Torgo. Dave has a great story about the capital raise. Wilbur Ross ended up being our lead investor. We raised $400 million, and it was kind of a remarkable time for those two as they were going through that process with no history of doing that in the past to that extent. The other aspect of being able to buy banks, they needed a management team, and I had gotten to know Dave when he was selling his bank. I was at Citizens. I was the individual that went to look at it to see if it would be a good fit for what we were doing. It didn't happen to be a good fit, and I explained that to Dave. Shouldn't sell it to us, and to our chairman at the time, we shouldn't buy it. But we had a good conversation and stayed in touch. And so as this opportunity developed, he recruited the CFO from the private bank out of Chicago, somebody he had worked with, who he had sold his bank to, and myself. And it was very entrepreneurial. I thought it was going to be a four-year hiatus from working in larger public companies. And we'd receive the opportunity to acquire one bank, but we thought there'd have to be a liquidity event within 4 years where we would sell it and be able to repay the contributions that were made by the investors. Well, the first bank was actually a remarkable opportunity. It was Citizens First out of Port Huron, about a $2.5 billion bank at the time. So you think about this $30 million organization buying a $2.5 billion bank. What it did for us, it gave us the opportunity to have infrastructure, to have an HR department, to have loan accounting systems, to have audit, to have all the fundamental requirements of growing an organization. So in fact, it was almost a reverse acquisition. Because First Michigan had the capital, that was the acquiring company, but the infrastructure really was Port Huron. And the other piece of the story is that it's really about talent. At every turn, we found people that were going to add significantly to the organization, skill sets that we didn't have that could help us grow, and work ethics that were remarkable. For the first couple of years, it was all about acquiring failed banks or troubled banks. And so you can see on the slide, Citizens First was the first bank. We were able to get a bank, First Banking Center out of Wisconsin, Lakeshore Bank out of Chicago, banks that were known in the Detroit area, People's State Bank, Community Central. And then we had another major event, the opportunity to buy a First Place Bank. It was a $3 billion bank out of Ohio. And that doubled the size of the bank. And it was a severely troubled institution. It had credit quality problems, which is the primary source of trouble for most banks, but had compliance issues, hadn't issued a financial statement in 4 years. And so we bought that bank out of bankruptcy and worked very closely with the OCC for a year to improve the quality of the bank. It was critical that it was really an all hands on deck. And I'd say one of the stories about this chapter is this 10-year chapter is focusing on the big issues. So during that transaction, I physically moved to Warren, Ohio for 15 months because it was the important task of the company to clean that up so that we could merge it into what was then Telmer. We changed the name of the bank at that point. But the really important story here is that we had this obligation to our shareholders to create a liquidity event. They gave us an extra year to buy this bank. The intent was to clean it up, but you've got to be very respectful with the regulators, because there's no given that you're going to achieve your objectives on their timeline. We were able to take this bank in 15 months, and from highly troubled, literally not issuing financial statements in years, and getting the support of the OCC to merge it into Telmer in February of 14. So you think about the timeline again. 4 years, our investors wanted a return. There's a typical timeline that they're looking at. So we've been a private company up to that point, but at the same time, literally almost the same moment that we merged First Place Bank into Telmer, we were able to take the company public. Now, that is was a huge moment for the organization, and really allowing for a second chapter. And so at that point, we, between 14 and 16, we grew the organization to about a $7.5 billion company. And again, it was time to find an opportunity to grow, and that was the merger with Chemical Bank. And between Telmer at the time and Chemical, we became a $17 billion bank, and ultimately grew that to a $22 billion organization. And again, I think about the impact of the infrastructure. With First Place Bank, we got more infrastructure. We had some of our operations. We kept down in Ohio. With Chemical, we had a significant investment in the Midland marketplace. And mergers are an interesting way to grow. It was a much more efficient way to grow scale, to gain customers, to gain products and markets. But I'll talk about it in just a minute, but culture, and culture is everything. And so every time you go through a merger, you start over again in the culture business. And we had a couple of issues as we went through that acquisition. Differences about how we were going to go to market a little bit, how we were going to make sure that we were achieving our objectives for our shareholders, and we missed earnings almost initially coming out of the chute as a combined organization. And that lasted for about 3 quarters, and then we ended up having a management change in 17. And at that point, Dave became the holding company CEO, and I became the bank CEO, and that's a kind of a routine that we had a number of times during this last 10 years. As we took a look at the company at that point, and how do we maintain the earnings stream, how do we maintain growth, it became clear that we had to really make a much greater investment in Southeast Michigan. That's when we announced the headquarters move back to Detroit. And it wasn't just back to Southeast Michigan, it was very purposefully back to Detroit. And I'll touch on that again when we had Gary Torgo as our chairman, Dave was the holding company CEO, and I was the CEO of the bank. And I think that relationship that developed over the last 10 years was important for me, and I believe important for the organization. All of us had different focuses. When I think about the relationship that I've had with each of them and the relationship with the bank, so Gary is, you all know him, a remarkable leader, principled in everything he does, lands on the right side of issues without thinking, broad relationships, but takes care of everybody, and I mean everybody. He's very focused on Detroit redeveloping. He's been an investor in the Detroit market for 40 years, and we all see the issues that our community has, how far we've come, but where we have to go. And Gary is one of these individuals that just leads on the right issues, on equality, on education, on opportunity for small businesses. And so you've got that perspective. Dave was always focused on acquisitions and transactions and the investor side. And Detroit was a great was a really great comeback story, and one that had national attention, and Detroit was an excellent place to be headquartered for that story. My focus was operations. How do we drive an organization successfully with growth, with cost management, with the efficiencies we needed, making sure that we had cash flow for investment. In Southeast Michigan, and Detroit plus Southeast Michigan was the economy within Michigan and the economy within in the Midwest that I thought we could really have tremendous opportunity. And so while we came to the conclusion that from different perspectives, Detroit was critical. And moving our headquarters back to Detroit really was a game-changing moment for the organization. And then our search for the new headquarters of the building is a meaningful story in our history. That merger got us to, getting us to Detroit got us to about a $22 billion organization. And then in 19, we merged with TCF. TCF was a merger of equals. Again, when I think about the importance of culture and people, merger of equals are the hardest way to bring companies together, but can be the most rewarding. We were very focused on making sure that the headquarters was retained in Detroit to continue to live up to many of the commitments that had been made by our organization. And but that got us to about a $50 billion organization. When I talk about the underlying issues that are driving the industry today, as a $50 billion organization, you really think that we've arrived, right? The scale of a $50 billion organization, great marketplaces, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, the Twin Cities, up to Colorado. We had some really good marketplaces. We had diverse revenue streams, we had diverse client bases, and all was going well. The COVID economy highlighted, though, is the revenue challenges, cost management challenges, and the scale to compete nationally on investments. Again, when I'm looking at our organization, where do we have the cash flows to invest for growth? And when you're having to find cash flows to invest for growth, and it's not just our company, it's all companies in the industry that and drive a highly efficient organization. You've got to be very cost efficient in the business that we're in. And so the mixture of this really is what's driving consolidation. We've been a willing consolidator and a willing partner. A number of times we've been the seller. Most times we're the buyer, many times we've been the seller because it's the right thing to do for all of our constituents. And then last December, we announced the merger with Huntington. This is one that I think is going to create just really an awesome company. The brand value, the brand strength of Huntington, what they've done in the last decade to develop their organization, the markets they serve are very similar. And when we put these two companies together, we'll close at about $170 billion. But we're really designing a company that's more than that'll be well north of $200 billion. Again, the importance of finding cash flows for investment. This new organization is going to be, I think, dramatic in its capacity to invest. One of the things that was announced last night is one of our executives, Mike Jones, an individual that we had moved from Minneapolis to Detroit 18 months ago, is moving back to Minneapolis for the new company so that we can really build out that marketplace under the Huntington brand. Is something I'm very excited about. It's been just an incredible journey when I think about where we've come in the last 10 years. But it's really a story about gratitude. When you go through this many changes and you move at this rate, you can't do it without people. And we're in a people business. From top to bottom in our organization, we have asked a lot of our teams, and they've delivered at every turn. And personal gratitude, I think, for the relationship with our executive team, specifically Gary and Dave, their commitment to making sure that we were continuing to grow, had investor strength, our board, and to move this fast. It's really about people. And on top of that, to me, it's culture and communications. And this is a slide that I think about. We went from about there's less than 100 when I joined the organization. We have 7,200 people in the company today, and there hasn't been a year that we haven't had a major change. With an acquisition. And it sounds easy. So you're a company that Telmer acquires First Place Bank. Well, even in that moment, we doubled in size and we took on new marketplaces. And so you've got to go back to. I always felt we had to go back to ground zero on culture and communications. Now we've gone from using mission, vision, and values to purpose and belief statements. And at TCF, the first thing we did after the merger was have our team work on a new purpose and belief statement, one that really spoke to all of our constituents, but specifically to our team members. So why are we here? Why are we working together? How do we come together? Over the next couple of years, and that's because it's a never-ending journey. And I use this funnel to visually think about how I talk about this a lot internally. How do we make decisions? How do we know we're moving the company in the right direction? How do we know personally we're moving in the right direction? Well, it starts with our purpose and beliefs. Everything I do every day has got to be well aligned with our purpose and beliefs. And if it's not, I stop and I tell our team that. If you don't think that you're aligned with our purpose and beliefs, you got to stop what you're doing. We need to really check what's happening there. And then our strategic plan. Every company has a strategic plan. And my strategic plan, I think about go out 3 years. My horizon doesn't, because of the rate of change in our industry, really doesn't go out much farther than that right now. But so, does our behaviors match our strategic plan? Are we moving closer to success or are we moving away from it? And again, these are filters. So if it matches the purpose and beliefs, if it matches the strategic plan, we're moving in the right direction so that our team members know they're contributing. And then the operating plan. And every year, and this goes back decades for me, the key objectives in an operating plan. What do we absolutely have to get done next year? And if we don't do these 4 to 6 things, we can't have a successful year. And it's worked on, those key objectives are worked on in the 3rd and 4th quarter. They're published, in the 4th quarter for the next year. Everybody in the company needs to know what they are so that I don't want any debate about, well, I want to go invest here or I want to move in that direction. And if it's moving us away from those key objectives, then I ask people to stop. Why would we do that if it's not moving us in the direction we have to move, that we've agreed on, are critical for our success? And that's all, to me, that's about execution. Again, it's the culture, the people. Are we developing a culture that attracts talent, that develops talent, that can build careers, that's a good place for our customers? These are kind of very simple words, but they're dramatic in their execution. And if everything goes through that funnel, we should be moving rapidly in the direction that we need to go and producing the results that are expected. Take me to the next slide, if you would. Thanks. So a couple things that I focus on, investing in teams. I think that sounds easy. But key positions. This is, for us, it's always been suiting ourselves for the next chapter. When we were a $2 billion bank, our goal was to double. So what infrastructure, what people, what skills did we need to be able to do that? And so we've been suiting ourselves for the next chapter, not only since this company, but my entire career. How do we get to where we want to go? In my world is people, making sure that we've got just outstanding talent. Usually it can be developed internally, but when you're growing, I always think 10-15% of your leadership needs to come from elsewhere just to have fresh ideas. Continuous recruiting. There's so many great people out there that you want to be associated with, and so expanding your network. While this seems timely, it's just fairness, right? So fairness has turned into conversations about DEI. While we've all been on that journey, I think that it's been accelerated. To me, and for all of us, hopefully it's very simple. You think about a generation and a half ago, we left 50% of the brain power on the bench. Well, how do who would run a team doing something like that? And now I think that the world is rapidly changing, and I hope that we can be leaders in this. But it's about fairness, basic fairness for our team and for the community. The next one is change is opportunity. I think about Sandy was talking about the number of titles I've had. Change is simply opportunity, and for us, talking about it openly with our team, we've had one of the key objectives being acquisition ready for 10 years. Every year we have to be acquisition ready. And that means change and be welcoming and figuring out how to serve new markets. And even in that hyper change, though, there's got to be some cornerstones that are givens, right? Our commitment to our team and the value we place on that, the value of customers. Why are we here? Consider the next one. Never lose sight of who you're serving. Your constituents should always be at the center. Our constituents are our team members, our customers, our communities, our regulators, our shareholders. They're all critical. And at different times they play different roles, but they've always got to be at the center. And because we started out as a private equity funded company, I say that having the shareholders center stage in every decision we make, are we spending money like they would expect us to, with the respect that it's not ours. Even I think of that because it's our depositors for the most part. But then I would invest in some of these key relationships. So in our world, the regulators. Make no mistake, in my business, they have life and death authority over our industry. And if you want to run your company, if you want to grow, if you want to take advantages, you have got to make sure that what their needs are critically taken care of. And so you think about compliance, and some people, think about it as a burden. Well, it's a level playing field. All the rules are written in English. We know what they say, and so you have to do it enthusiastically, and you have to do it really well. And even if it seems, it's part of the thing burdensome, you've got to explain the benefits to the customers, the benefits to the industry about why you're doing that, and but be really good at it. The last one is, let's talk about investing in mentor relationships. So I've been in the industry, I can't even believe it, I say 40 years. And things have changed. Here's how much they've changed. When I started as an analyst at Michigan National in 1981, the PC hadn't been invented. Everybody listening is probably just, you can't believe that's been here since the beginning of time for most people, but that's how much the world's changed. And so when I think about mentor relationships, part of them are kind of board relationships, or people that have experiences that I like to have. And you usually think of that as somebody mentoring you. Well, I think that the young people that we have in our business today, and some of our ERG groups, I think, are mentoring me. And what I can learn and grow and continue to develop myself, even at 40 years into the industry, is critical. And if I'm going to be successful in the next chapter, I need mentor relationships. And again, they come from all directions, above, below, new people in the organizations, industries that I haven't been associated with. But that's been very helpful for me, because it is. I believe it helps me stay current. It helps me appreciate the skill sets that and attitudes and experiences of others that help. The other reason is that I can be very insulated. The information that comes to me, many people want to make sure that I get their view or a positive view. I've got to build relationships that go beyond just my direct reports, that go beyond normal activities. Or again, I describe as being very insulated, and it can be damaging to myself, our company, and all of our constituents. And so it helps me, I believe, being current. And last one is, I've really benefited by doing new things. I've taken on assignments that I thought were small, but turned into just remarkable learning opportunities. I've had just remarkable growth by trying new things and taking on assignments and challenges that I would not have expected to, but have turned out just to be great chapters in my development, in my career, and have helped me help others also. Take me to the next slide, if you would. Matter of fact, just a second about the commitment to Detroit. We were a $30 billion bank, or $1 million bank 10 years ago, and kind of matching those concentric circles about wanting to make a difference, believing that we can make a difference, helping ourselves. I thought this was a great opportunity for us to grow and create brand awareness. And then I think from Gary's perspective that we will fundamentally make a difference. And so we've invested heavily, probably beyond our capacity in some cases, but are absolutely passionate that we believe we can help make a difference in the rebirth of Detroit and grow this community. In the lower left is the rendering of our new building. 7 stories of it are in the sky right now. You're going to begin seeing the sheeting going up on the outside of it very quickly. They're literally building it from the ground up. And I was down there 2 weeks ago taking pictures of it. It's very exciting. Looking forward to being able to move down there. The TCF Center, it was I think about these concentric circles again, an important time for the city to change the name of that. We were fortunate to be the recipient of that opportunity, and just very appreciative of being able to work with the board of the TCF Center to achieve that objective. And then just acknowledging wherever there's an issue, you're going to see Gary Torgo in front of it. He's done just a remarkable job. I've really benefited from that relationship, and I believe our entire community has. So we're staying. We announced in December that we were merging with Huntington. Part of the negotiations was having dual headquarters. The consumer bank is headquartered in Columbus, and the commercial bank will be headquartered in Detroit in that building. In addition to the designation that's our headquarters for the commercial bank, what was going to be 400 people in that building, we're now going to put 800 in that building as we build out that portion of the organization. And we're very proud of it and very sincere about our investments here. So with that, I think I think Sandy comes back on. There you are.
There you are. Awesome. Tom, thank you. First of all, what a fabulous presentation, not just about yourself, but I've known you for a long time, and obviously I've seen the organizations that you have led go through these multiple acquisitions and mergers over time, but to see it laid out on a slide from starting at what was it, 20 at a I can't remember what was the first amount to where you are now is just a phenomenal success story. So first of all, thank you for your time. Thanks for the great presentation, and thanks for taking the time to actually prepare such a thorough presentation, because we're all busy and we're all particularly busy during this pandemic period. We've always found more time in the day, but obviously you've had an additional piece of work in front of you, which is this merger. So my first question to you, before we go to audience questions, and I want to remind our audience that if you'd like to ask a question of Tom Shafer, please find the question box. It should be on a panel on the right-hand side of your screen. In microscopic print, it says questions, and there's a little arrow. You can click down on that arrow and type in your question, and I'll get to as many of those as I can before we wrap up in about 19 minutes. But my first question to you, Tom, is from me, and that is, what was it like having to develop and craft a merger of this size and scope in an environment where you were doing things more remotely than you would under normal circumstances? How did that impact the negotiations and the process, and what were the pros and cons of that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everything has changed in the last year, and you think about, had we done this 2 years ago, well, we're a skilled buyer seller as an executive team. But you'd have people sitting around a room with live conversation, with understanding the nuances of the conversation, watching body language. Is this a good transaction? Do we really want to move forward here? Does it achieve our objectives? Will the important things, our values, will they be represented as we move forward? It's a lot easier to do that when you're face to face and you're bringing people together and you're having, continuous conversation. I'd say that we've all learned new technologies. I didn't even know some of these technologies existed a year ago, and so we've done our best there. I think that it has part of it is making sure that you really articulate your position well when you're doing it by video, because it's not quite as easy to have the one-off conversation. If you're in a room with in a conversation with 8 people. Having the one-off is a little harder. So I think that organizing thoughts, organizing data is critically important. For this transaction, though, it was we know our team knew Huntington well. We've known Steve Steinauer for a long time. Actually, Dave, Gary, and I and our spouses, and Steve and his spouse were on a mission trip to Israel together a couple of years ago, and so we got to know each other. But knowing that company as a competitor, seeing what they've done in the last decade, how they've developed, the type of people they attract. I had the benefit of they acquired First Merit, which had acquired Citizens, which I spent 16 years at, so I know a number of people there that thrive within the Huntington system, but we know the culture of the organization. So if you start with that, you're really so far down the road, and then it's the financials. So we've got a team that knows what our future looks like, what their future looks like from our perspective, and but it's a little harder. You need to be a little more organized. You need to have. It would be very difficult to do this without an organization that you didn't have deep knowledge of or respect for, because it is many of the things that you would normally do in your due diligence, right? You would be interacting face to face with many of their team members. We couldn't do any of that. So starting with knowledge, starting with trust, starting with having respect for their brand and their execution really made this a much easier transaction. And I think that the timelines, the public announcements that we've made have shown the timeline on this. And so it would have been almost impossible to do that with an organization that we didn't have the knowledge of that we did.
Yeah, Tom, you said lots of interesting things there. One is the trips to Israel. Certainly over time, our friend Mark Davidoff has arranged many of those, and a lot of friendships have been formed on those Israel trips. But the other thing you said, and I was going to bring it up anyway, is that there's really no substitute for the personal in-person relationships. I mean, you just mentioned how people like Steve Steinauer and Sandy Pierce and David Prost and you and Gary Torgo, I mean, have all known each other for quite some time. There's that personal bond that I would imagine, going into a complex negotiation like this, really makes all the difference in the world, because you understand not just the culture of the organization, but you understand the person who may not be sitting from the other side of the table, but on the other side of the Zoom call.
That's exactly right, especially in a transaction like this. So we didn't need to, neither company needed to do this transaction, but it really, it creates a powerful organization. And so we do have to have some trust, because we negotiated it was a sale technically, right? We're becoming Huntington. And our team members that we've recruited to the organization, the customers, the vendor relationships, the community relationships, we're passing on in many ways. A number of us are going to be retained in the company, but you have to have a lot of trust that this is going to go well for your constituents. And this is a team that we have great confidence in.
Sticking with the pandemic, how have you had to modify your personal leadership style and approach with your team? You're not able to kind of do management by walking around because there's really no one to walk around to these days in our offices. So how have you changed your approach?
Yeah, there's been, I would say, good and bad that's come from this. So as an example, during 19, I spent 3 days a week in Minneapolis. So that was, we went through a merger. I was started as president and CEO of the company. And so 3 days a week I was in Minneapolis and building relationships. We've got a number of very large installations there where you can see people, right, just walking around and being in their meetings. Now the benefit is when I'm in Detroit, my drive to work's pretty short now, right? I go from 7 to 7 just about, and it's all meetings just like this, and so you can cover a lot of ground. I do worry that it's covering a little thinner. Again, the building of the relationships is critically important, and I'm not sure how quickly we come out of the pandemic behaviors, but we're getting better at this. I still think those face-to-face relationships, those understanding people's behaviors, their lives, their families is critical. Now, in many ways, I've gotten to know people's families a lot better because I see them holding their kids and their dogs, and for my life, I've got 2 grandkids. Because of my travels, I could almost say I barely knew my grandson. We had a grandson born during the pandemic, and I spent a lot more time with him. But for our larger team, we're going to have to really think hard about how do we, and it's not just getting to know people, how do we find talent, right? How do we help develop people? How do we make sure that we're mentoring, throughout the organization? And so we're all going to do a lot of learning, because I still think it's very, very important.
Now, in this pandemic, we have seen a lot of trends that were already occurring, especially in the adoption of technology that just exploded. People like me had to learn things like Zoom and Teams, and I'm still learning to make sure that I'm not muted when I'm speaking. But what kind of trends have you seen in the banking industry that the pandemic has accelerated that are really going to change the face of banking and are changes that are here to stay?
Well, the term exploded is the right term. It is, so we're the online account opening, the digital acceptance, the digital utilization, both on the consumer side and the business side, has simply exploded. And it has, so let me add a complexity. We also did a system conversion, so during the pandemic, right? But here's how limiting we are as humans. So McKinsey did a study before the pandemic, about how long would it take you to send your team to a work from home environment, right? Like 1,500 CEOs get asked the question, and the answer is 14 months. The average answer is 14 months. And if you'd asked me prior to March of 19, my question would have been, is it possible? And 2 weeks. 2 weeks is the answer. That's how long it takes to send everybody home. And not miss a beat, and send out wires every day, and do payrolls and ACA. We didn't miss a beat. And do a systems conversion. So systems conversion is, in banking, it's everything, right? Every customer account, every system. I mean, it was, and our team did that. And so the possibilities are unlimited. And but the rate of change is going to continue to do. So when I think of exploded, one of the reasons that I mentioned about the investment in technology, and it's not just client-facing technology and making it more intuitive for our customers to do business with, or for us to do business with our customers. Just the partnerships and the both techniques and process and combinations. And so I think it just opens up the ideas of the realities of possibilities, but it's exploded. I mean, it has just gone off the chart, and it's kind of a 10x type of adoption.
I'm glad you mentioned that McKinsey study about the estimated 14 months to go work at home. There's obviously so much tragic news about this pandemic, but some of the silver linings have been that we as human beings, we as people who lead institutions, probably have underestimated what we and our teams and our organizations are capable of. Who knew that we could do all of this from home to the extent that we are, and obviously to a large degree will continue to do. I mean, this is going to drive an incredible flexibility in hiring and workplace flexibility going forward that, frankly, everyone's going to benefit from. So I'm glad you brought that up.
This chapter is not going away, right? We have lessons that are going to be with us for a long time.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple times that you started in banking 40 plus years ago, back in a time when both you and I had more hair. So how has the employment profile in financial services changed over that 40 years? I mean, if you were a successful banker 40 years ago, would you be a successful banker today?
Yeah, that's interesting. So I think that people are people, and we're an accumulation of our experiences, the opportunities that we're given, and so the world has changed so much. So if you pulled somebody out of 1981 and dropped them to 2021, it would be a culture shock. In the internet, electric cars. I mean, things that just you take for granted today. But the difference is, I think, is attitudinal, right? So things that we touched on earlier. That so in 1981, there were no women in our executive suite, right? Okay, so there's 50% of the brain power right there by itself. Not even tasked or given an opportunity. So I think that we've made tremendous progress, but the other competition, the competition is the American way, right? So it has changed dramatically in the last 40 years. The non-regulated financial institutions, financing organizations, both on the investment side, on the funding side, has changed dramatically. And so you've got this is technology and attitude have changed fundamentally. So I think that I wouldn't say that they couldn't, but it's competing differently. And I think that the other thing is the rate of learning that our team members have to do today is dramatically different than it was 40 years ago. The ability and requirement to stay current the ability and requirement to change. I joined what was one of the most stable industries in America. Now, I mean, if you could read the tea leaves, I mean, all the signals were there for change, but it had been for almost 2 generations one of the most stable industries in America. And if you're not adaptable, if you're not capable of change or willing or excited or grow with it, and that I would say for the most part, the previous 2 generations hadn't been tasked with the rate of change that we have. So openness, rate of change, continuous education, continuously challenging ourselves on opportunity. That's what the current world is all about. If we give my forefathers a little bit of running room, they probably could have done it too, but it was different. I mean, as an analyst, I would go out on customer calls with the 45-year-old bankers, and they were drinking bourbon at lunch. I mean, it's just think of that in a company setting today, in a responsible setting today. I mean, it's unheard of.
Yeah, no, the two martini lunches. I grew up in Washington. Those 2 martini lunches were as true as advertised on TV. So the culture has changed dramatically. I think I have time for just one more question, and I want to focus on this theme that you mentioned about, how kind of stable, the regulatory environment was in banking, kind of up until the 1970s, and you mentioned all the things that kind of drove change. One of the most seismic changes in the financial services industry was the repeal of Glass-Steagall during the Clinton administration, which kind of blurred that line between commercial banks and investment banks. You don't have to necessarily comment on Glass-Steagall in particular, but what's your view as someone who has been an executive in banking for such a long time and have seen the landscape? Can you give us some commentary on, what regulations that have been drawn back have been really good? What are some of the ones that you think, I'm not quite sure this really worked out for the industry or the consumer as well as we had hoped?
Yeah, so I think about all the good intentions that go into some of these regulations, and then the unintended consequences. So first of all, we love our customers. We live for our customers. We get up every day passionate about taking care of our customers. And so the concept that we're out to get them is just, I've never experienced that, right? I've never been in a meeting where we said, boy, this is unfair and we're really gonna win on this topic, whatever it is. And so, on the consumer side, we have and there's been some good changes in collection practices and mortgage practices, but competition has driven efficiency, and competition has driven improvement as much as regulation has, I think. And so the complexity and cost of delivering some of our services, I think, we need to continually relook at, is there other ways to do that? When you think about investment banking and commercial banking, for small banks, their margin, they're really based on their margin. And that's they're taking deposits and still making loans or some fee-based services, but not to the extent of the Chases of the world that really have leaned into some of these other revenue streams. But you've got to have tremendous risk management practices, because the leverage that we have in our businesses and the deposits that we're using in our businesses can be really put at risk if your risk management practices aren't finely tuned for the businesses that you're in. I think that regulation has been cautious as we look at new technologies, as we look at you think about some of the fintechs that are pushing their way in and looking for charters. There's a whole conversation about credit unions and charters. But I think that consumers are going to continue to drive us to find solutions that match their needs, because it's an international business that we're all running today. We're not, borders can't protect you anymore. regulations ultimately can't protect you. And so I think that our infrastructure, our regulatory infrastructure needs to keep up with consumer demand with international practices. And so it'll change. I think that the pandemic is going to push even harder for convergence of consumer desired, demanded activities, you know, banks and other regulated institutions being able to provide them.
Well, Tom, we have reached 12:30. First of all, I want to thank you for your time today, for your commitment to the chamber, but also I want to thank you and David and Gary and the rest of the team for your ongoing commitment to the region. Obviously, you know, the commitment, the ongoing commitment that you have made to Detroit and to Michigan with every iteration of this banking empire that you are growing has been truly appreciated, and your commitment to the chamber is truly appreciated. So thank you, Tom. Just sharing a little personally, Tom and I live in the same general area of the world, and we used to run into each other at various fundraisers in our little corner of the world, and also the car wash. And now that we're not doing those things, I miss seeing you as frequently as I used to. But thank you for everything, and thank you for today.
Sandy, thanks for having me, and look forward to seeing you soon.
Great. And to our audience, thank you again for joining us for Inside the CEO Mind with Tom Shafer of TCF Bank. Join us tomorrow morning when our guest will be Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.